going to be very brief. Delighted to welcome you here this evening. I'm Jill Constantine, I'm the head of the Arts Council Collection. And I trust you've all enjoyed Night in the Museum. It's an extraordinary exhibition. We're fortunate to have two very distinguished guests here this evening. Artist and curator, Gander, and Francesco Manacorda, artistic director of Tate Liverpool. Gander is one of the most innovative artists working in Britain today, and his practice combines inventiveness with an element of playfulness, and I'm sure you've all seen that in the exhibition this evening. He's exhibited widely across the world, having to Tokyo, Vancouver, Mexico City, Guggenheim, New York, San Francisco, Venice and Sydney biennials, and closer to home his work can currently be seen in British Art Show 8 in Norwich.
And at Cactus in Liverpool.
Sorry, Cactus in Liverpool. It's a particularly important year for us because 2016 marks our 70th birthday. And to celebrate, we commissioned 8 artists to make a work for the collection. Ryan was one of those artists, and you will have seen his work alongside this evening, the beautiful blue cube and the Degas style ballerina. One of the major components of our celebrations was the exhibition Night in the Museum, and we were delighted when Ryan accepted our invitation to curate the exhibition. The exhibition began as an exploration of figurative sculpture and collection, and then this narrowed down to the idea of the gaze, of becoming the spectator, which we all are when we go into the gallery. And you will also come across with a strong sense of blue, which Ryan regards as a key component of contemporary art. Francesco Manacorda has been artistic director at Tate Liverpool since April 2012. Prior to that, he was director of Artissima in Turin, was curator at Barbican, and visiting lecturer in exhibition history and critical theory at the Royal College of Art in London. Francesco has curated numerous group shows, including Subcontingent, the Indian subcontinent in contemporary art, the Martian Museum of Terrestrial Art, curated the Slovenian Pavilion at Venice Biennale in 2007, the New Zealand Pavilion in 2009. He is also a writer, having contributed with reviews and features extensively to many publications, including Donus, Flash Art International, and Art Review. In 2013, he was a member of the international jury for the 5th exhibition at Venice Biennale. So we're particularly honoured to have him here tonight for this conversation with Ryan. Just like to say that this evening, Ryan will be available to sign catalogues after the evening conversation, so if you would like to come out, Ryan will be happy to do that. I'd also like to thank Yorkshire Sculpture Park for hosting this event tonight. So I will just leave it. Perhaps you'll give a warm welcome to our two speakers tonight.
Thank you very much. I'd like to just verify that we can assume that you all have seen the exhibition, right? So we can talk about it straight without having to describe too much of the setting. There's one thing that I'd like to start with, which is blue, and the color blue. Why, and why color?
I thought that if you saw blue, if you saw contemporary art in a Bugs Bunny cartoon, it would probably be a blue square. And I've always gone with that idea that a good stereotype of something that looks like contemporary art or like a cliche or a pastiche would just be a blue cube. You can see it, can't you? Bugs Bunny in the gallery and then a blue cube.
So a cartoon of Yves Klein would work very well, you think,
yeah.
as a version of the artist who...
Yeah, I didn't think of that, but yeah. It's a similar blue as well, it's ultramarine, but blue's also the colour of, like, you know when you turn your TV on and there's no signal, it's blue, isn't it? Which means nothing. And the sky is blue because of its depth, which is sort of eternal. And there's another blue. Stuart, what's the other blue? I don't know. There's lots of blue. Yves Klein blue, there you go, Yves Klein blue. There's lots of blues that is sort of nothingness.
Yeah. There's one particular element of the show that really extends your practice, and I think it's this idea of animating a sculpture and sort of bringing it to life in a way that you have explored with your work, but in these pairings that you've done also, how do you say, sort of makes a relationship between two works become anthropomorphic nearly, right? And do you see that as, apart from the work around the ballerina, do you see that that's something that you're interested in as an artist rather than just as a curator?
I think, first of all, I think I'm not a curator, which is really important to say. I think that an artist's practice is similar to curating because you make associations or collisions between things. But I wouldn't say I'm a curator because I don't know enough about the history of art to be a curator. And I always say that curators dedicate 20 years of their lives to understanding art. You should let them do what they do. You shouldn't argue with them or ask for a show by someone else because we don't know anything about art in comparison to curators. You wouldn't go to your doctor and say, I've got a headache, I'm going to drill a hole here because that's where it hurts. You trust your doctor because they spent decades learning about your brain. Similarly, what was the question? I'm totally lost.
It's about animating sculpture.
Animating sculpture. I think you can have, so there's these three bottles and the way that you approach, they're exactly the same apart from one's a little bit empty. But you can approach them in different ways and they're totally different things. So any of those artworks in there could be in a different exhibition and not feel activated. Or something similar to one of those sculptures that are in there could be not in that gallery but in someone's home and it wouldn't be activated. There's just different existences of the same thing. Does that make any sense now, really?
I think it does. I mean, this idea of activation is quite interesting because while you were speaking, one thing that came to mind is an early work of yours, the lecture around loose associations. And I wonder whether that was somehow a starting point because you talk about curating being a practice that we all do in the essay that you wrote for the publication. And somehow, for me, when I first encountered your work, that was one of the first work that I encountered, and this idea of jumping from one thing to the other, and in that connection producing more electricity than there would be in the isolated thing is something that I always been inspired by as or I aspire to as a curator.
I think that's human nature, isn't it? That's the nature of being human. Is to associate things. Is to, when you sit in the pub and you talk about your mum and then you talk about the phone ringing because your mum had just called, you talk about the ringtone and then things just move, associatively. You never stay on subject. It's only in weird academia when you're on a stage and you do a lecture on a subject that you stay on a subject. But as humans, we don't stay on subjects, we just jump about freely. So the lecture was a bit of a tongue-in-cheek, ironic attempt at pretending to be academic and making a lecture, but making a lecture in the language of the everyday that everyone would use, like being in a pub.
But it's not just being in a pub, because in a way that lecture and what you've done with this exhibition also creates some sort of completely non-linear narratives. It's not only things that
it creates all sorts of narratives that I didn't expect or construct. And associations and collisions, it's just like a massive surprise. And it's a massive surprise because I didn't think any of it through. It sounds really like I'm a bad curator. But the reason I didn't think any of it through is because, if I'm perfectly honest, the job was far too big. So when I was invited and I accepted, I thought it would be great. And then I realised, when I saw the collection, how much of a mess I was in. Because the collection's colossal and massively diverse, politically, socially, historically, it's just all over the place. Like it should be, because it's a cross-section of art, the English Arts Council collection.
So how do you make the pairings?
I made rules. I thought I'm going to spend I'm never going to make another artwork if I just curate this, because I'm going to just spend all my time not knowing what to do. So the first thing was to narrow it down. So I thought about dice. I'd done a show at Tate Britain before where I used dice to pick things from the collection. But so I thought, what rules do I need to make if I make some sort of confines or restrictions for myself? Then it'll make the job more manageable. And the two rules I made was, one is figurative figure sculpture, any sort of figurative form that is looking, and the other one was colour field, abstract or geometric works, or that contain the colour blue. But in the beginning, I thought it'd be all sort of Grazer or Van Doesburg, or I don't know, those kinds of works paired with Henry Moore bronzes. I just saw this duality of what it would be like, and of course it's not like that at all, because there's gold figures and there's a big monkey made of fiberglass resin and there's all this other stuff that you just don't expect. So we filtered it down. Actually, Natalie did all this. She filtered it all down for me because it was too mind-boggling, and then we went through it, and then the next rule was just to pick the stuff that I liked, because essentially there had to be some of me in it, so I just picked all the stuff that not that I thought was good or quality art necessarily, but just stuff that I'd like to see out. If I went to a museum, I'd like to see what it looked like. Very simple, really. That's why I say I'm not a curator.
But still, you made some decisions. I mean, you are talking about sort of algorithm
we made
to
lots
narrow
of
it down.
decisions, but
They are more intuitive than theoretical, you mean?
yeah.
And
I had a head start because I'd created a system for myself to
and
select.
did you make decisions on which couples, or was it more about
Yeah, a
the
couple
gaze?
changed. Actually, I was looking at the book today. But the other thing is, during this process, I have to say thanks to Natalie so much, because during this process, I fell out my wheelchair in Berlin and broke my shoulder blade of my shoulder. And I've been at home watching TV for 6 weeks. This is the first time I've been out and seen more than 3 people in 6 weeks. So having all these eyes staring at me is terrifying. So Natalie took over a bit.
You feel like a bit like one of the paintings, no? The sculptures looking.
I do feel like that. This is what it's like to be a Wolfgang Tillmans photo. Just everyone looking at you. So we did it via email, and yeah. But I mean, there's some associations that you wouldn't expect, like the Don Brown, these two. So things that I didn't expect. So these two, for example. So Don, he lives by us, and our kids go to the same school, so we know him. And this is his wife, Yoko, and he makes sculptures of his wife. And she's friends with my wife, and they come over for Sunday roast. And this is, of course, David Hockney, but it's just, this is only here, isn't it? Because it's going to the Tate for the retrospective, I think. So you're quite lucky to see it's not in the whole tour. Which is like a seminal piece, because, was he at the Royal College or the Royal Academy? Royal College. So when he was at the Royal College, he painted this, and homosexuality was illegal then. So, and it's about him coming out, but he went back and repainted over it, We Two Boys Together Clinging. So it's like a really significant work. But they're both somehow about sexuality, aren't they? So that's like the sexy pairing. And then
Your favourite.
But it's the same, there's all these sorts of weird associations, like the development of the human mind. This thing's like incredibly complicated. And then there's a monkey trying to work out what it is. So, but all these themes, they come out, I wasn't like, I need a theme about sexuality or... So this pairing, the Nymph, the seated figure by Nymph, looks down at the David Batchelor. Essentially, this is the only work in the collection, logistically and physically, that looks down and can look at a David Batchelor work. So there's other logistical ways that things happen, and you know what I mean?
But then because they are in the same room, and because there's a sort of meeting of gaze, then something else happens. That's what you were saying, that, when you saw it, like more things were sort of coming out. That you
there's
went
all
and,
levels to it.
I think one of the amazing things is that when you walk around the exhibition, you really need to walk around the work, because then you sort of discover the two objects looking at each other. And I really enjoyed feeling like a painting looking at the sculpture, essentially. When
you said that before, I'd not thought about it, but it's an amazing idea that the Spectator becomes an artwork. You feel like that's what it feels like to be an artwork.
At least you try to put yourself in the position of the observed or the observer. So that duality, you try to break it down or to sort of put into the shoes of the sculpture somehow, or into the shoes of the painting, which is even more fun, I think.
It's harder to imagine to be in a painting than it is a figure, though.
Yeah.
Just trying to do it then. It's difficult. Feeling really flat.
But you
I did a joke by accident. That's it.
Thank God for perspective.
Yeah, exactly. We could go on.
Yeah.
Just wisecrack tennis or something.
But one thing that I was thinking when earlier you were describing the whole process and like the set of rules that you put together, and then you said I chose this and I chose that, and then the pairings came together. How much is that parallel to the way that you make work as an artist? How much do you set rule for yourself?
If I admit to it, it makes me sound really geeky, but it's exactly how I make artwork.
But that's
in fact, sometimes I surprise myself and I'm a bit artistic, and then I feel really good about myself. But most of it's just science, logistics and maths and probability and lots of lists. I mean, my practice is really like clinical and anal and architectural. The studio looks like an architect's office. Everyone always thinks we make buildings. So
one day.
I don't know, it's just the way I am.
Yeah. But I think that's really quite interesting because I've been interested for a while in the tradition of how artists curate, and I think that the best possible way in which artists inhabit curatorial practice is when they either like extend their practice and like continue something that they started with the work within the grammar and the language of exhibition making, or you know, the same method is used and imported. So if you think of the Uncanny by Mike Kelly, or even some of the touring shows that were organized by the Hayward Touring, like Tastadine or others, or Simon Starling, it's the most amazing thing which I think happens with this show is when, you know, you look at a work, and this is particularly poignant, I think, because you have the new commission at the entrance, and then you look at the show, and then you go and look back at the new commission, and there's a sort of back and forth and some sort of hypertextual relationship between what happens in the work and how an artist work, and then the curatorial practice.
That wasn't a question.
It's not really a question.
But I agree with it.
Yeah.
I felt a bit funny about having the commission at the front, but Jill made me. Because I never think it's cool for artists to put their own works in curated shows. But
it's great to have it in another room, no?
Yeah,
like
that's why we divided it in a way.
Yeah.
That was my get out of jail claim, wasn't it? Don't think bad of me because I included myself.
So is this the first time that you curate other people's work? Apart from that, you had Tate Britain, right?
Yeah, that one, and then there's a thing now in Norwich, which some of the artists are here actually, that we did. Me and JP Watts, he's a writer, and it's not really. But when that's an exhibition of hotel rooms to coincide with the British Art Show, and their artworks by artists from Leeds, and. In a sense, me and JP curated it, but we didn't say we curated it. We wrote service provided by, because again, we didn't feel like we could say we curated it, because all we did was organise a space and a meeting of people that we thought were really interesting. Mm-hmm. So, I don't know. So that's kind of like... But I mean, a lot of the works that I make are collections. They're like the works that I do that are on conveyor belts. There's 2 of them, and each is 66 objects, and they're a collection of objects, like the Generation game. They go past the window, so the artwork moves around you, and you don't move around the gallery space. You just sit there, and it comes past you, and you can't control how fast it is. So you just have to, which is it's a bit like the what they call it, scroll generation. With I'm scrolling from left to right. Which shows I'm 40, because you scroll from up and down, not left to right. I'm doing that. But that idea that someone's lost interest before they've even seen the image, and they're on to the next image, and on to the next thing, and on to the... Or similarly, the idea that when you see something that you want to hold on to, it's already gone before you. But they're collections, essentially.
Yeah.
And it's funny because some of my work that pays for us to be an artist ends up in collections. So the idea of a collection is and in these conveyor belt works, there's other collections. So in one of them, there's a collection of mints. But you know, I don't know. People collect Ferraris, don't they? But I collect mints and stones from the beach. It's like...
Cheaper.
It's much cheaper.
I mean, I remember once you told me about windmills within windmills as one way of describing your work, you know, like, which is similar to what you just said. Like, it's a collection that ends up in a collection. So this sort of mise on a beam of like the same system, which ends up in the same system.
Yeah. So in a way, this is an extension of that.
Yeah.
But I think the idea that as an artist I have those systems and those structures in place, the nice thing about it for me is I always end up somewhere that I don't know where I was going to end up there. So with all these associations here, it's just like a lot of fun for me to see them, to go in there and be like, you know, it's like a big exploration. Mm-hmm. It's an investigation. It's not like I know what I want to do. I just create a system or a framework and something happens. I mean, that's the way all art should be made in a way. It shouldn't be that you sit down and you think, oh, I've got a show in September, I better make something that looks like art, which is the way a lot of artists work. If you just have a creative life and you lead a creative life, and everything that you see as an open possible, like playing with your, you know, doing something with your kids, making something with your kids. Like loads of my work comes from my kids. Or cooking food, like you might need smoked vodka because you've invented a cocktail, so you learn how to build a smoke and you smoke vodka. Or you grow shiso because they don't sell it here and you need it because you think this would be good with it. Just that way of living, you just get a fallout of art. You don't even have to make art. Stuff just happens around you from that type of living, I think.
You said at the beginning, I'm not a curator. And you're not tempted to carry on this, but do you think that it's because it's too close to your practice and your way of thinking? Or do you think that there's other reason why you don't want to be a curator?
Because it puts curators out of jobs. It's not fair on them.
There are too many already.
Yeah. I'm watching your position for when you leave. That's my big goal. Move to Liverpool.
Yeah.
Get your job. I don't know. I mean, just because I don't need to define it by the term curating, because the work that I make is curating, and it doesn't really matter if it's curating or it's art. It just matters if it's interesting or not. It doesn't. And if I say I'm a curator, people run with. People like hard, fast ideas of things, don't they? They don't like wishy-washy grey areas. So if I start curating, it'll become like the artist in the wheelchair that curates. I've already got a wheelchair to try and get out of your minds. And I've got to get rid of the curator thing as well. I'm going to have a lot of work to do. Start asking me about wheelchair shows I've curated. That was... Sorry. I'm transfixed with the electric wheelchair. It's playing on my ego a bit, and I keep coming back to it. Go on, sorry.
Yeah. But, I think there's an element in when I try to define what's different in the practice between artist and curator. I mean, nowadays a lot of artists are curating. There's like all sorts of biennials that are being curated by artists.
Oh yeah,
like,
that's a huge trend, isn't it?
There's next year it's Istanbul, curated by Amgren and Dragset. But I guess when people ask me what's the difference, the thing that I like thinking as a difference is something that we discussed earlier briefly, which is like the curatorial practice is only temporary. Like, you can position these 3 bottles like this, or, you can position the David Hockney with the Don Brown, as you said, but it's like, it's only for a few months, and then they all go back to their normal.
That's it. Futurist exhibition lasted a long time. You close your eyes, see the Malevich. see it all, can't you?
It stays as a picture.
Stays as a...
Yeah, as a picture. So as a sort of documentation of something that happened. But, you know, in your work, like the conveyor belt, that's forever like that. Or, you know, the association photographs.
That's true, yeah.
And I guess that's exactly, as earlier you were saying, like you were a bit scared to ask some of the artists about how you wanted to position things. Was it difficult? Did anyone object?
Well, you think considering they were all artists and they're interested in everything that's different to them, and they're quite liberal and open to difference, that they'd all be up for it. I don't know. They were, weren't they? There was only a couple. They were all, some of them are dead, so they didn't have anything to say. The estates said that it was all right, I think. But they were all pretty, we asked them all and made it very clear. But it's interesting now because today I took some photographs on my phone for Instagram, and I put one on Instagram and I was like, oh, the Thomas Hasaugo I should put the back of it on a picture. And he's on Instagram, so he would see it like straight away. And I was like, oh no, I've just put a picture up of the back of his work with Liam Gillick in front of it. And I was like, well, that makes his work more important because it's looking at the Liam Gillick, because it's a Spectator, or does it? You know, it becomes like this. It becomes really political about...
Yeah, who's looking at what?
Yeah, and then you put the person in it. You know, my mum, when she goes to a dentist's waiting room surgery, she just watches everyone. That's her, like, she loves looking at people. Watching. She says, Ian, that man over there is reading a woman's magazine. You know, that kind of... And that idea of people watching is, she's always said, the best thing about going to a museum is to watch people looking at the works. And it's interesting because, I don't know why that is, maybe she thinks she doesn't have an opinion about the work, but seeing other people forming an opinion in the physicality of forming an opinion about an artwork is interesting. It moves her away. There's a distance. She becomes like it becomes anthropological, doesn't it, or sociological. It's like a different... She's all of a sudden displaced from that situation and looking in on it, which is interesting.
So you were trying to recreate that dentist situation between artworks?
Yeah.
Watching each other and...
But then people watch in pairs, because the artworks are the artworks. You know, when you think of the artworks, they all hold their own issues, meanings, themes, perspectives. And then you have the dualism of the two artworks, the pairing. And when they're together, they hold a whole other range of themes and perspectives. They're no longer these single entities. It's like making another artwork just by cohesing them together, which is a weird thing that I didn't really expect to do. So I actually, when we were starting to do it, I felt kind of, it became more political than I realised, because I was using other people to create meaning, other people's meaning to create meaning, which I've never really agreed with that much. And then all of a sudden I was doing it by accident. I was like, oh.
You never agreed, as in, like, you would have objected to curators wanting to do that? Or would you have resented to curators who do that?
No, I've always allowed that with my work, but I don't know. It's very complicated. But that's why it's interesting for me to do it, because I don't actually know. And there's a range of different feelings across each of the pairings as well. Because, you know, there's like not the mermaid, what's she called? So there's a video by Mario Garcia Torres, Frances Darlington, The Little Sea Maiden. So this is from like 1905 and this is from 2004. There's like 100 years between them. So there's like this time travel as well in a weird, you know. And he's from Mexico and she's English, and it's all very confused. But it's good because confusion creates new meaning.
Yeah. Did you, I mean, as an artist and having experienced this, do you feel that artists curating have more license than curators curating?
Yeah, because curators, when they do the things that artists do, they become like, I shouldn't say the name of the curators. Is it being recorded? There's curators, isn't there, that we know. This is ridiculous, going around in circles. There's curators who do that
Yeah.
Call artists up and say, I'm making a show about my hair style. I don't know,
Yeah.
or whatever. Can you make a work about my
outdoor
hairstyle?
hair,
And
yeah.
like, well, could do, but, you know, does it have to be green and red because it's in December and you've got to put it up for Christmas? Or why don't you make it? I don't know. So I think artists can do that, can't they? Because also there's a sort of empathy with other artists, because we're all in the same boat, I think.
Yeah.
Where when you move through disciplines, there's a sort of, well, you do your job and I'll do my job. Yeah.
Did you ever get curated by an artist before?
Did I ever get, yeah. Did I ever get curated by, yeah. Simon Fujiwara at the Hayward about last summer, was it? And it must have been before that as well.
So did you also in that occasion feel that you know, because he was an artist, you could allow
Yeah, I mean,
meanings to be more loose?
Yeah, just let him use it like a material. Use the work like a material.
But you wouldn't? Would you allow a curator to do that, or would you be more?
Depends which curator it was and the relationship that I had with him, and whether I got paid or not. No, not about the payment. No, if I knew him and it was a good conversation.
Yeah. But going back to the show, what is the most unexpected meaning?
Oh, that's what I was going to say.
Yeah.
You said before you all came in, you said, which is your favourite pair? And then we realised that when you go to an exhibition, you never say, which was your favourite artwork, do you?
Yeah.
Do you?
Yeah, I do it all the time.
Oh, well, you're an anomaly. Does anyone else?
Which one?
I never do.
Which Rembrandt could you take home? Kind of game. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we won't talk about
Fine
that. No, I was just going to say that I've never done that, but actually, in the last couple of days, lots of people have said. We said, didn't we, Natalie, that what's your favourite pair? Because there's this duality. All of a sudden, it becomes like encapsulated, or there's a bubble around it, and which work better. Then we were talking about the thing in The Guardian where they go on the date and they mark each other at the end. It's a bit like that as well. It's like blind date art. This like.
It's totally like that. And last year I did. I worked with an artist curating. I worked with Glenn Ligon doing an exhibition which had gone to Nottingham Contemporary first, and then he came to Tate Liverpool, and we reinstalled it. And Glenn was like fascinated by the different meanings that would come out of the exhibition just because of the response to the architecture and the fact that certain works ended up close to others. So rather than your favorite pairing, is it like what surprised you the most that came out of the pairing when you first arrived in the space? And
God, this is so difficult. That's really hard. Are these two still together? They are, aren't they? Or have they moved? They've moved. But originally, they've switched, but originally I quite like this because it's Vaughan Williams. He's obviously a composer. And this is obviously like a visual composition. I thought that was kind of cool. But that was on paper, and this doesn't exist anymore. But that's all right, because loads of other stuff exists. And what's also really great is that everyone in this room has different associations and ideas about all of them, so it doesn't make any difference really. You could like literally put a jigsaw down there, cut the spine off and throw these in the air and pick them up and pick two, and you would find a really interesting relationship, because that's just the way the world is. These are kind of good.
I like that a lot,
I don't know, just like...
It's probably also the only two that are two sculptures, no, rather than... is it?
Yeah.
No, the Anthony Carra as well.
Yeah.
Two sculptures.
But I when I look at these, I look at them like noises. Because this is like, and this is like... But because they're both like, they both feel like they're the same sort of materiality, but they've done different things. You know, like in Terminator, when he's made of liquid silver and he reforms, it feels like that they're actually the same thing, but they're just behaving differently.
Into different state of mind, let's say.
Yeah.
Did you, because of what you just said,
Yeah.
did you ever think about sound and music or any sound or like sort of time-based thing? Because there's the Mario Garcia
There's
Torres,
only
obviously.
Mario's that's time-based.
Yeah, but the fact that you were interpreting them with sounds, onomatopoeic sound, is like quite interesting. That brings.
I didn't imagine any sound, no. But I think those two, for me, when you see them, they are like sound. It's always with those two, it's always the first thing I thought. They're like noises. Yeah, I don't know. It's hard to, without being there. That's why the book's good, isn't it? Because you get to take it home, and it's only £7.99 available. Very reasonable. There's other associations which are quite interesting in the way the Matt Derbyshire is next to Don Brown's Yoko, and they're not paired together, but there's a great association there where one's a giant and she's tiny, and they're right next to each other, and you're like, whoa, this is weird. It's a kind of
20% smaller and 20% bigger.
Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah.
It is what it is in the end of the day, isn't it? It'll all change when it goes to Birmingham. We'll have to do it all again. And there'll be other works. And some of these works have got to go and start the whole thing again. Mix it up. It's literally like throwing a load of cards in the air and seeing the way in which they land, isn't it? Yeah, the Dobson with Roger Hewans is nice when you enter. I like that one. Just reading stuff from the catalogue. I could have done a solo show of Jacob Epstein, to be honest.
Well, we should just still do
Just
it, no?
amazing.
Like when you take over
So
my job,
underrated.
you should, yeah.
And there's so many in the collection and in Gasworks in Gas Hall collection. There's loads of them.
Yeah.
They're all amazing. Really underrated. You should do a show of him, I'd say.
No, when you take over my position.
Yeah,
you
it's
do
been my
that.
first show.
Yeah.
After I've finished all the programme that I inherit from you.
Yeah.
That I won't enjoy doing.
I just want to ask you about the title. Did it come before or after?
The film.
Yeah.
I haven't seen the film.
You haven't seen the film?
We had to talk to a lawyer
And
about
you've
it.
got 2 kids.
Yeah, it's scary and it's got dinosaur in it. We don't do dinosaurs, they're girls. Just do Pokemon and nice stuff.
Of course.
There was loads of titles. I can't remember any of the others now. I had a big list of titles and this was one of them. But this is Night in the Museum and the film is Night at the Museum, which was a lawyer told us that we had to change it, I think, so we don't get sued. But it's essentially that thing about, I mean, it says this in the text that I wrote in the book anyway, but I was in when was it, 2008 maybe, I was in Pittsburgh for the Carnegie International, which is a big international, like a biennial. And I stayed there for ages because I was doing a big work. I was there for 2 weeks, and to get to the room I had in the museum, you had to go through some other rooms. And every morning I go past this Degas ballerina, and every morning I thought, like, she's amazing. Like all the stuff she sees must be, because I was in the museum when the guards were there, and some rooms are alarmed and the lights are off. It was night in the museum essentially, and it was just me and her in this room. And I was thinking all the stuff she usually sees in the day, and then boring during the night, just dark, and there's no one there. And over the course of the days, she came to life. And then I thought, like, what would she do if she wanted to explore the institution, not the institution of the museum, but the whole institution of art? What would she look at? And she definitely would go for the Mondrians or the Van Doesburgs or that kind of hardcore geometric works. And then it really changed my understanding of art, that moment when she came to life. And because then now I ask, when I see artworks, what would they say? Mm-hmm. if they had souls, and if you do that, you understand. I mean, there's all the questions that you normally ask about artworks: use, cost, function, worth, value, authorship, ownership, all the stuff we ask about everything that we don't know how it works. But then if you ask something like, what would it say? you understand it in a completely different capacity, I think. And so it sort of comes from that, that and my mum in the dentist waiting room. Those are the two key factors of the whole.
There was a moment when I was installing with Glenn Ligon, in which we placed a large Richard Serra drawing in the room, and then we couldn't decide what to put in front of it, and at the end he was quite keen to put this film by Agnes Varda that is about the Black Panthers.
Right.
So it was like subjecting the Serra to endless seeing for 3 months of this film, and but somehow that was really the reason why to do it. It's like it was like really treating artworks as living entities, as like things that travel across time and grow and change and like an individual, like, you know.
They do, like people, they get old.
I think so, yeah. I mean, in fact, that's the reason why artwork become in fashion, out of fashion, and or all of a sudden become super relevant. Like, you know, Duchamp was irrelevant until Jasper Johns and company just, you know, brought him back from not completely forgotten, but like it became like a star in the 50s. So it's like some works have a sort of delayed effect, like they're created in a particular time and then they become to
so weird though.
Life. It's incredible, no?
It's weird for artists as well, I think.
It is because it's really tough.
There's a time where you're out of work.
Yeah.
Lawrence Wiener once told me he's the only artist that I know who's been constant forever. His appreciation by people has never changed.
Yeah.
And he told me, I asked him why, and he told me it's because he always opens his door to anyone. So he'll get curating students call me when I'm like 21. He'll say, come and have a whiskey. And so he's always in stuff because he just opens his door to everyone. It's amazing, really.
It also. Once I met him, he opened the door when I.
Did you? He was talking about you.
Exactly.
It was you.
And he told me something that really was very important for me, because he said like, you know, my work in another dimensions are sculptures, and that's again like, comes back around to what you've been trying to do in terms of, you know, activating.
Yeah.
Like, it's on the one side, I think, looking at works as if they were people, but also on the other side is knowing that the work needs that activation, that needs that gaze, whether it's from another work or whether it's from a human that really sort of brings it to life. I think it's you achieve to make that manifest and visible in a really remarkable way.
When I'm in a museum and there's a load of people crowding around at work, it's always the work I don't go and see. I was like, it's probably rubbish. But it's interesting, that, isn't it? The way everyone's just drawn to the work, that everyone's like...
Yeah. Good.
Right, is that it?
Yeah. No? Maybe we can open up to a few questions.
But nothing too challenging.
Oh, we got a microphone, yes.
Is that doing anything? It's a bit nerve-wracking. Can I do that?
I know that you said it was kind of technical, but overwhelming just with the amount of work and everything there was. I'm really interested to think about how my behaviour in going around a show, if I can use that term, that art, was changed by a relationship that you set up, but then we were all behaving in a different way to each piece. I think we were, by looking at what I was doing and what other people were doing, because like you say, the pieces then became a pair. And we then were looking at a pair. I think most people looked at it then as a pair, which became another piece of work. And then, you know, people, I think generally, didn't walk through the space between the two.
Yeah.
Because you thought, oh,
that's weird. I never thought of that. It's true.
the way of
the tension between.
But I'm also in the way of
a relationship.
Looking at the painting.
Yeah.
And I better not get in the way. And if I do, you know, it says do not touch on a lot of the floor. And I was thinking, if I go through that, is it going to beep at me? Is it going to be like, me thing? She's gone through the gap. And I then thought, well, I'm going through the gap because I can. And then you turn around and look at the figure, and then, of course, that looks different because mostly you're looking at the back of the figure because you're looking at the piece the figure's looking at. And I thought there was all sorts of interesting things. And then every time I saw a person looking at a piece next to a figure, it was then, well, is the figure looking at the piece? Is the person looking at the figure or looking at the piece? So, you know...
You should have come up here and done
Yeah,
the talk. It's way more interesting than what we were saying.
It's just so interesting seeing all that dynamic that what I was doing when I was looking at other people.
Were you looking at other people seeing if they moved or if they were sculptures?
Yeah, and then I was looking at who the photographer was taking pictures of. Was he taking pictures of how they responded to the person? There's all this stuff going on in the same room. And it was so interesting. And then I started thinking, have I actually looked at anything at all? Because I'm looking at all the stuff going on. So that was, thank you.
That's good.
I wish I could have a feedback like that for a show I've done.
Brilliant. Do you want to write my next catalogue text?
Actually, yes.
Yes. Yes.
So thank you, I really enjoyed it, but I suppose the question in that is, did you choose all the, what you call geometrical pieces in a big flurry, like, choose these, and then, choosing all the figures, and then put them together, or did you just get completely distracted all the time?
Shows them separate. Actually a mix, half. Some of them were... It was organic. It's a safe answer. It was an organic process.
The distraction was part of it, right?
A bit of both, I think. Yeah. There's like 3 things you just said there that I hadn't thought about, so that's nice. Because I've not actually been in there with a lot of with people in there. So I haven't had I'll see that tomorrow, I guess. The force field's interesting, though, between the two.
Yeah.
Like you said, it's dividing a relationship. It's funny that that are sort of... There can be that tension between 2 things that's so strong that physically you wouldn't want to break it. It's all psychology, and it's like a show about social psychology. Psychology show. Can we change the name?
But you were quite hard to get the gaze at a certain level as well, no? To look into
It was really hard.
Yeah.
Natalie did all that. It was really... The plinths, we had to make plinths to the sizes that usually the artworks weren't stereotypically shown on. To make sure that they were looking at so all the plinths are different sizes to what they would usually be, so they were looking at the things. This is quite difficult. Yeah. Thanks, Natalie, for doing everything.
Any more questions?
You talked about scroll generation. It got me thinking about time. How long should people spend in an exhibition? I'm sure we've all been in those exhibitions where after half an hour it's a bit hard work, we're going to work our way through it. And then we've been in those exhibitions where we want to go around 2 or 3 times and then go back. So what's time factor?
That's, I don't know. It's funny, I guess in a different...
How long should we spend in this show?
Just stay till you need a cup of coffee. Stay till you need to go to the shop. I don't know. I don't spend a lot of time in exhibitions. My wife's always really critical of me because I just actually wheel around like I'm not interested in art at all. Because I think I know how to look at art really well, so I don't need to. I don't know, it depends out. I don't know. I've never thought about it. I guess in the next venue as well, that will change it all as well. It's like you say about the artworks being people and getting old and changing through time. I guess that the configuration changes that as well. It's a nice subject, that, though, the time that people spend looking, I think, as a kind of general subject. There's a nice work by, what's his name, Keith Tyson, is it, who made the work where you open it, and it's solar panels. And when the solar panels illuminated or taken in the light, a counter counts down, so the work has a life expectancy. So it can only be shown if you own it. Its value decreases over time because when it is you're contractually obliged to destroy it when the time is up, which is a really nice work. Yeah, videos, they're annoying, aren't they? I only make videos now that are under 90 seconds. So just decided. Because people just have such a short... Actually, I made one like 2 months ago that was 7 minutes. I'm lying.
Yeah. No one's going to see it.
But videos like that are good. Like, you know, TV commercials, music videos, ones that have a short amount of news items, very concise. DVD screensavers that loop. I really like videos that are like that. I'm just going off on a mad...
But in your work, you have
nothing
played a lot with, like, for example, inverting space and time, and the conveyor belt is that, you know, it's like, instead of having an exhibition spread out in space, you have it spread out in time through a window, and also the window and what you see and what you don't see in particular is something that
I think that's
played a lot in your work.
Yeah, like all my work is about the stuff that isn't visible.
Yeah.
It's like a cloak and reveal thing, where most of it's always cloaked.
Do you think that plays a role in this show as well, the non-visible?
Yeah, because the things that you see in this show are things that you wouldn't see when you usually see those works. Like the tension that you were talking about, the space between the two things, you don't usually see that. So maybe this is a reveal and not a cloak. I don't know, it's the great thing about being an artist, apart from you can decide when you go to work, is that you're like, it's like being at school, do you know what I mean? I loved going to school. And you just constantly learning stuff, and you can wake up and go, I want to learn about, I don't know, anything. McDonald's drive-through, who designed the McDonald's drive-through attendance uniform, or anything. It's amazing. And so all these things are just like, yeah, they're like big experiments to see what happens. It's a really lucky guy, aren't I?
I've got two quick ones.
Yeah.
The first one is, in your pairing, are all the pairs respectful, or is there one that you put in there that they've really got beef, they've got some issues, these two? Or are they all very respectful of each other, or is there one in there that you think...
What, one that's weaker than another, or...?
The cheeky ones.
Yeah, any kind of conflict between them.
Yeah, there's definitely conflicts between them. In my mind, but you might not see them, you'd see different conflicts. But I shouldn't talk about them because these were made by people, humans. Yeah. And humans have feeling as well as artworks.
Unless you choose those who are dead. No?
I don't mind insulting the artworks, but I'm not insulting the humans. So yeah, but that's another thing that I only found out yesterday, how political it is. It's such a political show. Without even intending to be, that just like is a fallout of it happening. It's like massively political. And of course everything's a little bit political, but this is like, you can see it's significantly political.
And then my second one,
yeah.
You mentioned rules earlier on. Do you stick to them quite religiously, or do you allow yourself to... the excitement of you following them and the thing makes it different, or do you break them? No.
They were negotiated and compromised upon. Because I'm colourblind, so a lot of the works that I thought were blue were purple. So that was and then some of them, the photography from like the 70s was dire, wasn't it? It was like black and white, and you'd get this blue work out and it was green. Like, oh no, that's not going to work, is it? So there was a lot of...
So you stuck to the rule of it being blue rather than I saw that as blue and I want it in? So
yeah, we stuck to that, actually, yeah. There is one that isn't blue, isn't there? Is it the David Batchelor's? Yeah, that's a grey blue, but I think David Batchelor hasn't got a proper blue in it, really. It's more of a... Yeah, that's a weird grey...
David Batchelor, for all people, a man who wrote Homophobia.
It's more like teal, isn't it? Says the guy who's colourblind. It's more like a teal, really.
But in your practice, do you stick to rules, or are they negotiable?
Of course I don't stick to them.
Good.
Are you
good
mad? As long as people think I stick to them, it's fine.
like an installation rather than being a curated show. It was much as about you as it was about the works of art. I really enjoyed the show, but I found the paintings difficult to look at like I do now.
Stuff standing in front of them.
Mr. Barnett Newman, you said about sculptures being something that block your way to seeing good painting. It was a bit like a blockbuster. I was sort of looking around, and I enjoyed the fact that it was installation in that respect.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Makes total sense.
Alright.
But again, it's political, isn't it? Because essentially I'm like playing puppet master with loads of people's practices when we think of it in that way.
Maybe that's
Which is
a
not bad,
cloak
that's
moment,
not,
no?
it's
When
just,
you-
just different, isn't it?
Maybe that's the moment in which you block something, like what Barnett Newman says. It's like you're blocking
Oh yeah, that's the
the
cloak.
viewing of a painting by
And not the
position.
reveal, yeah. Yeah. Someone must have done this before then, no? This show someone must have already made this in History of Art, because it's like,
Not that I know.
so obvious to do a show of art looking at art. I'm going to go I didn't even Google it. Better check it on my phone now. Yeah, I didn't even Google it. There's a question over there, sorry.
Not so much more, I just want to share with you that we've had the chance in my school, primary school, have a look at some of the pairings before the show.
Oh, yeah.
I love the opportunity to kind of explore that unspoken dialogue between parents. And one of my boys came up amazing.
Did you do some of the quotes? Your kids did the quotes, yeah?
A couple of them. And one of my boys came up with the idea of the pairing of Lucy and Martha, which they all really love.
Yeah.
And he came up with this notion of the primitive Lucy, looking at kind of, for the very first time, seeing something new, but also that the blue of Bob Evans' piece represented a boy, and she'd actually fallen in love for the first time.
Oh, and she had a bum out
And,
as well. Weird.
And they created a whole kind of gallery of love of Lucy.
That's so nice.
And blue
Wow.
and then abstracts, and then photographed them. And they loved that dialogue and that kind of learning that came from looking at pairs and partnerships.
Do you think it provokes some more in the pairs then than just, yeah?
Definitely, yeah.
That's good. That's really good.
We have a Cookie Monsters gallery as well, where we created, for the little tiny kids, where we curated little pieces that we created with blue 2D works, and then photographed Cookie Monsters, looking at them.
Amazing.
So that was cool.
That's the big test. My kids are coming tomorrow, that's the big test. My eldest,
Yeah.
Olive, she always tells me if it's rubbish or not.
They haven't seen it yet.
No, she stands at the studio door and doesn't let things out sometimes. She says they're not ready. So I wasn't worried about this, I was just worried about tomorrow. 6-year-old.
Any more? No? One more?
Are there artists that you show us that you didn't know the works before you found them in the art?
Yeah, loads of them. Lots and lots. So, yeah. Yeah, it's funny that, isn't it? Well, it's not really funny, because it's not. I don't know a lot about art, to be honest. I don't go to a lot of exhibitions, and I don't read a lot of art books. Also because I think that it really makes me...
I was thinking, going back to your original choice, that you're faced with all those things that you have to do something with, then presumably the rules that you made up would be a bit like me thinking, well, I could go on holiday on my own, but what am I going to do? But if I think of something like, well, perhaps I'll photograph church doors, that gives it some kind of purpose. And I wonder, maybe your rules gave you a purpose.
That's really interesting because, do you know, I always think that, I remember being an art student, a young artist, and I remember thinking that I should do design because I'd make money, and I decided to make art and not do design, knowing that I'd never make any money, and I felt really mad. I felt like I was totally losing it. Like, why am I collecting bus tickets? That's like what a mad person does. Do you know what I mean? Why am I spraying the inside of milk bottles and lining them up and giving them names? That's what mad people do. It's a really, really, like, being a young artist, and it's stressful because you feel a bit mad. Because the things that you do are associated with madness in a very real sense. But what happens is, or what happened with me is, I sold an artwork, and all of a sudden, there's a reason to do it. And it was really, really weird. The logic of economics made it not a mad scenario anymore, because I could just sort of, what's the word? Excuse myself, excuse the madness, because there was a reason to do it outside of just the futility of doing it, which is exactly the same thing.
I think I felt that way as an art student as well. Originally, I started doing mixed media and then ended up doing sculpture. I was putting things together and I thought, well, I can put something together and make a sculpture. And I can say some kind of bullshit thing about it. So the tutors actually think I'm doing something artistic.
But you were. You were putting something together and saying the bullshit thing.
My brother sometimes really painted it, so I can do three of these and they'll sell, but I like pop ways. But what I really want to do is this, and I kind of think, well, do that then. And do what you really want to do. And I moved into sort of kinetic sculpture, kinetic light sculpture. And I actually enjoyed that more until the tutor said, oh, we saw it in the 60s. And then I thought, well, I didn't know what to do, so I just built towers and things. And then they said, oh, that's like outsider art. But at least I was doing something I enjoyed better. And that gave me meaning. So up to that point, I hadn't really found meaning.
A few years ago, I started making lamps. Do you remember there was this rise of furniture designers who would become like Max Lamb, Martino Gamper, and they had furniture galleries, and they'd make one-off furniture pieces. Yeah. So they'd make a sofa that was like £45,000. And you'd be like, but there's only one, so it's like art. But it's not like art at all, really.
No.
At all. It's nothing to do with that. But so this was happening. I thought a really nice comment on that would for me to start making functional items and saying they were art and showing them at an art fair rather than a design fair. So I started making these lamps, like with my dad in the garage, out of old bicycle handlebars and mops and buckets and bits of cement and bricks and cable ties and gaffer tape and when I was making them, I didn't feel mad at all, because you could turn it on. Because you can use it, a functional thing. It becomes like there's no madness associated with it. It's really weird, though. No one ever talks about that, feeling mad.
There's also an element when you sell a sculpture that it becomes alive. No? It's like it's in the world.
Yes.
It's not your thing anymore. It's like,
most of mine are in skips. They're not. At least 80% of my work's in skips. That's not alive. So.
Shall we?
Is that it?
More questions?
Oh.